Hello, my name is Kelly Peoples. I will be talking about Chapter 8, and we are talking about writing routine and positive messages. Our 4 learning objectives for today are outline an effective strategy for writing routine business requests, describe 3 common types of routine requests, outline an effective strategy for writing routine replies and positive messages, and describe 6 common types of routine replies and positive messages. I will be talking about the first 2 learning objectives today. So our first learning objective is outlining an effective strategy for writing routine business requests. When writing a routine business request, you always want to include an opening, a body, and a close. This is still a formal letter, and you want it to be professional. In the opening, you want to have a clear statement. It's going to be your main idea for the whole paper, and you want it to be easy to understand for the reader. The body of your request is going to have the details about your request, and then the close is going to end with your request of a specific action. You want to be respectful when you're writing these. You never want to be rude or anything, so keep that in mind when you're writing your business request. So for the opening, you're going to start with your request. You're going to let your reader know exactly what you're asking. And of course, when you're writing, you want to be respectful. So pay attention to your tone. You don't want to come off demanding or rude. If you do, your reader may not be so willing to help you out or may not want to read the rest of your request because they think, oh, you're just being, too demanding. You also want to make sure you're being specific, of course, but you should already assume, since it's a standard business request, that your audience is going to comply with what you're asking because they already kind of know. And of course, be specific with your details. Make sure you include things like dates or times, so that the reader knows exactly what you're asking for, and of course they know when you need certain things by, because if you don't include dates or times, they may not, they may just respond when they feel, it's there, when they feel they can, and not really helping you out. And if you're too vague, you never want to be too vague because they may just have to ask you more questions. Maybe they misunderstood what you were asking, and then it takes more time for them to respond versus you just writing out all your details and your request simply, and then they can just respond with that action that you're requesting. So for the body of your paragraph, you're going to expand on your details, and you also want to justify, of course, your request. And if you have multiple questions, you want to make sure that you put the most important question first. Because if you have a lot of questions, you don't want the most important thing you want answered first. You don't want that to get lost in your paragraph. You also, if you have maybe a more complicated request or something that's maybe unusual, break it down with all of the details. And really ask the specific questions. Make sure that they'll be able to understand what you're trying to ask of them. A lot of times, if you show your reader that your request could benefit them in some way, they may be more inclined to respond, maybe to help you out. If they see that there's maybe a partnership that could be formed, then they might be more willing to work with you. So if you're including all of these things, you're just showing the reader that you have respect for them and for their time because, you don't want anything to be confusing. So for the last part, it's going to be requesting a specific action in a close. So in the close, you want to request your action, and then there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. Make sure to include the dates, of course. If you don't, people are not going to know when you need things done by. Include dates, times, that way they know when to respond, how much time they have to respond to your request. You also want to make sure that you want to put your contact information. If you don't already have, you should already have your contact information somewhere on your document, but If you don't, make sure to put it in that close. They need to know how to contact you, of course. If they have other questions or just to send the action that you're requesting, they'll need your information. Of course, make sure to thank them. It's very, very important to express your appreciation because obviously you're asking for something. So they're going to want just be respectful and thanking them. Don't thank people in advance, however, if you just say, oh, thank you in advance for your time. No, that feels kind of pushy. They don't really like that. Make sure you just do a simple thank you and that works for them. So right here we're looking at a good example of a business request. This is of course in an email, so it might be a little bit different if you're doing a formal letter. Of course, they make sure to put the request in the subject line. They have a good opening. They go right to the point of your request. And they also, for this one, they make sure to know, it might take a little bit more effort to respond to this request, but it's going to help us both out. It's going to help everyone. They make sure to put all the details, and then the close has a clear deadline, includes the date, and so the reader knows exactly when to respond by, and they put a great thanks, and it's a perfect example of how to do a great request. So our second learning objective is describing 3 common types of routine requests. So there's 3 common examples that you might run into in the business world or the hospitality world. It's going to be asking for information, asking for recommendations, and making claims and requesting adjustments. So our first one is making, our first one is asking for information. So there's 3 simple points that you may want to remember for simple requests. It's going to be what you want to know, why you're making the request, and why it may be in your reader's interest. When you're asking for information action, be sure to use the direct approach. That just means just stating exactly what you want. Don't be vague. Make sure to include a lot of details, but don't go around it. Make sure the reader knows when they read it, they know exactly what you're asking for. You also want to make sure, and then to also go off of this, the second and third point, which is why you're making the request and why it may be in your reader's interest to help you, those you may not need to use every single time. It's more of a case-by-case scenario, so definitely take a look at that, but be sure to be direct and just be respectful. And if you, of course, have any more complicated requests, make sure you give detail and you give explanation of exactly what you're asking for. Okay, so when you're asking for recommendations, you want to open with why your recommendation is required. So usually when we're talking about recommendations, a good example would be if you're interviewing for a job, the company may ask you for some references. So they just want to see, they want to see other people that may have worked with you before. Do they think you're a good hard worker? Do you think you have good character? Do they think you have good skills? Things like that. So you want to, of course, put down those references. You never want to put down someone without asking them first. Don't just put down someone, because that would be a very awkward phone call if they were to call and be like, hey, this person put you down as a reference. So for asking for recommendations, we're talking about when you go to ask that person as your reference for permission. So you want to be sure that there's a couple of things to remember. Make sure to put why it's required. So you may be putting, hey, I'm interviewing for this position at this company. Was wondering if you could write a recommendation for me. Something like that with, of course, your request and your action. If you haven't talked to this person maybe in a while, you want to remember to, just help remind them. Maybe talk about a time that you guys hung out together. Talk about an event that you attended. Give them dates. That way they can kind of remember who you are, and then they'll be happy to, write you a recommendation. You also want to add the person's full name and address that they should be writing to. That way they know exactly who to address it to. And just to be on the courteous side, you could always include an envelope already pre-addressed and stamped. That way they don't have to worry about it. And then once they write out their reference or recommendation form, they could just send it off to the company. Make sure to, of course, express your gratification. I mean, this isn't a favor that they're doing for you. They want, to help you get the job. Make sure you thank them. That's definitely the most important thing. And make sure to include in your close the dates. You want to be sure, hey, I need this by such and such date, because you don't want them to just see this and be like, oh yes, I'm going to write it, and then they get to it a week later and they've already missed their chance. Be sure to put the date. That way they know when to respond. So this is a good example of a recommendation letter. In the opening, they explain exactly what the situation is. They're interviewing for a job. They need a recommendation, so they thought of this person, wondering if they could get a recommendation, asking for the request. They also talk about a time that they were together. Oh, you taught me this class. Do you remember this? Just to get them to kind of remember who you are. And then, of course, this is a great one because they enclose their resume. So maybe it's someone you haven't seen in a while. They don't really know what you've been up to. The resume will show them exactly what you're doing, what kind of work you've been doing, maybe your skills. That can kind of help them, write a good recommendation letter for you. Well, I know this person is blah, blah, blah. You want to make sure that this would be a great, helpful tool for them. They also, of course, include the deadline. Very, very important. And then they, of course, express their gratitude. And it's a perfect way to end the recommendation letter. So our last one is making claims and requesting adjustments. This is going to be when you maybe use a product or service that you didn't feel was very satisfactory. So you're going to send them a claim of, what the problem was. So you, of course, when this happens, it's very upsetting. We don't want those emotions to come out in the letter. You want to make sure you're very clear, you're very calm, don't let the emotion come over you. In the opening, you want to explain your problem and give details. So explain the problem with a clear statement. This such and such is what happened to me, and then request your action. Maybe you need a new part, maybe you need a new product, maybe you want a refund, something like that. Put that in your opening. In the body of your claim, you're going to put all the details. So write out exactly what happened. Don't be vague. Make sure you put step by step exactly what happened. List all of your details. You also want to make sure that if you have evidence to something, maybe you have a picture of a broken product or something like that, make sure you have those in case they ask for evidence. Make sure you're able to back up your claim. For the ending, you're going to, of course, request your specific action. If it's an easy problem or an easy fix, you, of course, can write that in your closing. Maybe you just need a new product. Maybe it's a very simple fix. You can put that. If it's something that's more complicated, tell them to look at the situation and see what they suggest. They may have already dealt with a situation like this before, or they may know a different solution to what you're thinking. So let them look at it before you write your suggestion. Of course, include your contact information. Give a phone number, give an email, something that they can contact you with. They may have more questions about your claim. Maybe they need to be able to send you something. Give your contact information, of course, so that they can contact you. So this is an ineffective claim. A lot of it's not very effective because they don't get to the point of exactly what they're asking. They use a lot of emotion. You don't want an emotion to come over you. Like I said, you want it to be clear statement with the action. There's a lot going on in the beginning, and it's just it will make the reader kind of confused. The second part, also again, still more emotion. They're not really giving a lot of details of the whole problem. It's not really helpful. And in the end, there's not really a good request. It just says the first time we complained, nothing happened. Can you help us? There's nothing really that they can work off of. So it's not going to be, they may not even respond back. This is going to be a more effective claim. The beginning, very calm, clear statement, gets right to the point of what they're asking, and with a good request. They also make sure they give lots of details so they will understand why the problem happened and what else went on. They give a lot of detail, and then at the end, they're able to provide the action. And don't forget, they included their contact information as well, so that way they can get back to them and hopefully help them out with the solution. Okay, thank you so much for listening to my presentation.